Welcome back to Trailmakers with Fenrir. Today we're going to be taking a look at my top 10 fighter jets of 2025. So starting off in 10th place and working our way upwards, we have the Kitten Jet Mark 12Y9, which is a fairly upgraded version of a much older plane. And it has full thrust vectoring, like all the planes you're going to see. Even the propeller plane has full thrust vectoring that's on this list. But this one also has these little yaw pods on the side that were my old form of yaw thruster, but then I articulated it on the back, and on this model I kept both, so it has a rather significant amount of yaw thrust, to the point where it'd be easy to think there's gyros in it, but there's not. I haven't used gyros in a long time in my planes. I kind of consider that for noobs. But anyways, let's get flying and talking about the plane a little bit more. It's got decent agility, though it's a little slow to get started and stop in its roll, just because the extra weight on the wingtips out there, and the, I'm assuming the laws of inertia kicking in, given Trailmakers has decent physics. But yeah, it has very good yaw force, but the rest of the thrust vectoring is also logic supported, so even at slower speeds, it can give full maneuvering force, which is important because the weight of this plane really kind of demands it. It doesn't give it stellar maneuverability at all. It just keeps up with the weight of it, chunkiness. Because it is 158 power cores, and only 20 of those are for weapons. It's a lot of thruster weight. But yeah, what else can I say about this plane? We have an air brake. If we try to yaw in both directions at once, it spreads out the tail and works as a decent little air brake. So it can keep our speed reduced or slow us down for landing. We've got the meow sound effect, which I also use for an alarm and some other little situations. We got smoke trails, flare launchers, and fireworks, which are meant to be the chaff. Those like anti-radar clouds that planes can pop out. But yeah, I think that's enough said about this plane. I'll probably want to talk a little bit more in depth about the ones that have more interesting features going on for them. But even though I came in at a bad angle, I'm still going to try to come in for a landing here. It did just fine. A little floppy, but not too bad. So let's move on to number 9. Oh, actually, before we move on to number 9, I forgot to mention that one of the reasons why this one's so zippy is that it's partially zero-dragged, which is that zero-drag glitch, where when you detach blocks that are covering up aerodynamics, they don't regain their aerodynamics. I could probably make a separate video on that now that I've been using it more often. I never really used to use it in the past because I thought it was a little cheesy, but now I use it now and again. Most of my planes aren't, but this one, it's partial zero drag, so I figured I'd mention that before I move on. So moving on to number 9, we have the Kitten Jet Mark 14I2, which is a VTOL. And if I open it up in here, you'll see what I mean by that. We have the thrusters on hinges, so that we can toggle them on and off to face either backwards for main thrust or downwards for VTOL thrust. And we have a little bit of logic in here. We've got the logic that supports our thrust vectoring up front here, which just turns on the thrusters when we're maneuvering at slow speeds, whether we're using main thrust or not. Then we've got the, what is this? Alright. This is what keeps the the maneuvering thrusters from giving too much forward thrust when we're in VTOL mode. So it disconnects these ones from the R2 control when we switch into VTOL mode so that we don't push forward if we don't want to. But that's all just a fancy way of saying it takes off straight up and has full controls, although that wasn't the most graceful because I wasn't I'm used to a better VTOL that's later in the list, and this one doesn't have quite as much oomph. Let's go up a little higher and try that again. Like I was saying, it has full controllability. Again, no gyros. It's just, you can see the articulation of the thrusters wiggling around in the back there. But yeah, this one is, it's not nearly as fast because it's not zero dragged and it's a lot less power force. This one's only 74, but it's got the same weapons kit. 6 smart cannons and 2 rockets. And it's got a couple of the same bells and whistles. And again, I'm not flying this very well, so I'm not representing it as well. But it is only number 9 on the list, so maybe that's kind of fitting. It just doesn't have quite as much maneuvering force and the thrust vectoring as the later VTOLs do. So I keep completely overshooting what I'm trying to do, or undershooting, I mean. Either way. This one does have an added feature in the rudders for the air brake, in which when we yaw, both of them go left or right, but we still have our air brake feature. And that was just a little tweak to it. Instead of actually having to add more logic in, it just had to rearrange the actual the fins in which direction they were pointing, and I was able to set it up so we've got twice as much yaw articulation. It lets us spin in a circle a little bit easier. Nothing too special, but figured I'd mention it. But let's move on to number 8. So coming in at number 8 on our top 10 list is the Squishy Mark 1H, which is the only propeller plane that's going to be featured on this list. So it is a hybrid, and gets at least 50% of its thrust from regular little space thrusters. So it's not strictly a propeller plane. It's okay though. It doesn't have to be one or the other in Trailmakers. It can be both. But as you can see, it's got a little bit of logic in there. And by a little bit of logic, I mean every piece that's not a wedge is probably a logic piece, or an L bracket, or a couple of see-through pieces here. Not counting, but yeah, even in the back tail here, there's logic stuffed in, and all that. Well, most of it's there, so that it has a low and high maneuvering mode. So when that little red light on the back is on, we're limiting our servos by 50%, and when we turn it off, we have the full range of movement on them. And once we get into the air, you'll see why. But let's just set our flaps, because that actually is important for takeoff on this one. Because with our flaps, we take off like a dream without touching the controls at all. And in high maneuvering mode, you'll see that we can spin around pretty aggressively to the point where it completely stalls out our speed and we drop out of the air like a rock. But if we turn on the low maneuvering mode, see the little red light come on, it restricts the angle that we, or the amount that we can turn by limiting the angles of the servos so that we don't stall ourselves out like that anymore. And it also affects the rudder, so our yaw is not too aggressive, as well as the thrust vectoring, so that's not too aggressive either. And as for the rest of the plane's features, we have just 4 smart cannons on this one, with the old school weapon skin with a better sound effect. And we've got 3 bomb bays that drop in a rapid succession for a tight cluster. And of course we have the sound effect and the smoke trail. Just the little tidbit features. And Squishy is actually, again, a fairly older plane that's just been upgraded a bunch, which is why it's the Squishy Mark 1H. Let's see, H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, so this is the 8th version of Squishy. So it's a good plane. It looks good, it flies good, and it does good in the fight. Well, at least a fight against a fair opponent. It's only 32 power cores after all. But yeah, as you can see in build mode, it's got a little bit of zero drag on it, but that's just to get rid of the terrible aerodynamics from the all the piston glitching up front. The flat surfaces and stuff mainly. And then a little bit extra to balance out the aerodynamics because they're offset weirdly, so that it doesn't fly at a weird angle or anything. But yeah, let's move on to number 7. Next up we have the Kitten Jet Mark 14M, which is quite an interesting one here. First up, you can tell it's a very weird shape for a plane, and also there's 2 cats in it, and those cats happen to be bombs. Also, what's not as visible is that this is also a VTOL, with the articulated thrusters in the body, just like the previous one. So we can lift straight up off the ground, hover around, all that good stuff. And we have the meow sound effect, although that's our only little bell and whistle. And if we drop one of these little cats, you can hear it meows on the whole way down. And there's 2 different fuses. There's an inertia fuse, so 2 seconds after dropping it, it arms, and then once it stops moving after that, it explodes. The other fuse is a basic altitude fuse that just makes it explode on the water surface. And as far as the plane goes, it handles good with or without the cats on it, though in VTOL mode it is a little bit better with the weight of the bombs on it. It's not especially fast. It's not very high power cores, especially if you count the fact that this it still has 6 smart cannons, and then I don't know how much dynamite's in the cats actually, so I'm not sure what the total count is on the thrusters, but it's not much. But if we just repair real quick here, we fly around with the cats on, you'll see that it actually flies a little bit more stably, albeit much slower, when it has the bombs on it. They've got a lot of drag, but they're positioned and built just right to maintain a good angle and trajectory. So we're nosing down ever so slightly, naturally, but it's very, very slight. And if we ditch the bombs, you can see we start nosing down, and then we start nosing back up a little bit once we regain the speed. And yeah, once we're up to full speed, it wants to nose up on its own now. So it splits the difference. But yeah, that's about all there is to say about this one, other than it's nicknamed the Wishbone, because this is about the period in which I started giving them names again, instead of just numbering them. But anyways, let's move on to number 6, because that's about all there is to say about this. So coming in at number 6 on our list is the Kitten Jet Mark 14O, the Pixie Blade, as I like to call it, its little nickname. As you can see, it's very small compared to the other ones. and it looks very exposed, but there's actually a layer of armor panels here, so that when the piston glitch collapses, most of these are completely covered by either the blocks beneath being overlapped onto them, or that little layer of armor. And that, combined with its small size, making it harder to hit it in the first place, actually gives it decent defense considering its size and overall block count. It's also 2 guns less than the standard kit. It's just 4 smart cannons, but it still has the 2 rockets. And it's full thrust vectoring, with pitch and roll on the same set of servos in the back. So there's no articulation in the wingtips like like a regular plane would have. It's just all handled in the back. And I would say the weakest point on this plane is its rudder. The vertical stabilizer there, because it's only held on by 1 wedge, has to be destroyed. And there's actually 3 different points of failure where only 1 block has to be destroyed to knock it off. And that's not very good. That's usually how this plane gets shot down. And it can take all sorts of bullets across the rest of it thanks to its armor and the redundant wing surfaces piston glitched in. But yeah, it's a little bit weak in some aspects still. It's the price you pay for being small. What you gain by being small, though, is by having less drag. This thing can get almost up to 500. Actually, no, it can get up to 500 if I'm going in a bit of a dive. Just barely hit 500 there. And instead of smoke trails or flares or anything, it can just set itself slightly on fire for its aesthetics, giving itself a nice flare trail. And before we move on, I suppose I should show that it has a fully zero drag form as well. So here it is with the zero drag on it. It's always colored. I always try to make sure to color the zero drag pieces differently so that I know what's going on and what's going to be breaking off or not. But yeah, for the most part, it's exactly the same, except once it's over 500 miles an hour, I think the threshold is, low speed maneuver, or the low angle maneuvering mode kicks in to limit the actual movement of the control surfaces so that you don't lose as much speed by over maneuvering when you're going supersonic, because that's how control surfaces work. The faster the air is passing over them, the more aggressively they maneuver. So to make up for that, there's logic in it that kicks in at high speed, and limits the movement. Which is all a fancy way of saying it goes fast and doesn't lose its speed as easy. Get ourselves a good sonic boom there. But I think we should move on from this because it only gets better from here. Next we have 5th place on our top 10 list, the Mark 14L Skydancer, which is another VTOL. And this one has pitch and roll connected on the same servo, unlike the earlier one. But it does have the same articulated thrusters throughout the body and on the tail, and all that kind of stuff going on for it. And a very similar setup in the cockpit here. What it does have going on for it extra is a little patch of armor here, in the area that it's most likely to get hit. And I would have had more armor on there, but I believe it was interfering with the piston glitch. As soon as I was adding more, this area wouldn't sink in anymore, and that was problematic. But let's get to flying it. As you can see, we have our articulated thrusters there. And this one lifts off a lot faster because it's got a better power to weight ratio for its downward thrusters. And the thrust vectoring setup gives it quite a bit more maneuverability over the Mark 14 I2 from earlier. It does, however, have the same kit, the standard 6 smart cannons, 2 rockets, flares, chaff, and a meow. So all the basics are there. But if we just come in down here and come into VTOL mode real quick, you can see that that extra maneuverability also lets it gain stability really quick, which is important in these manually controlled VTOLs because there's no gyro support or dampening or stabilization at all. You have to manually balance them out yourself. So having it as responsive as possible has been really helpful compared to the well, you saw me flying the other one earlier and kind of crashing it all about, and you can see me flying this one and hovering around nice and easy in and out of flight. So the difference is kind of easy to see. Just overall a much better plane to fly. But nothing too much more special about it, so let's move on. In 4th place, we have the Kitten Jet Mark 15A2. One of the more recent planes that I've made, and probably one of the most thruster-heavy planes that I've made in quite a while. It's a little hard for me to... Well, actually, if I just opened up the panel here, you can see that these ones are kind of zigzagged into position on top of being piston glitched in. So there's a lot of thrusters in here, to say the least. It's nearly max complexity and nearly 200 power cores, so it has some zip. We'll put it that way. And similar to the earlier zero-dragged plane, this one does have a low speed and high, or a low and high maneuvering mode, but it's toggled on and off manually instead of being triggered by speed. So that way it's just a lot more under the pilot's control. Having it automatic and speed dependent it never really worked out too well, even on the super fast planes. But another noteworthy feature of this one that's logic-based is the rockets. There's 4 rockets that fire in 2 pairs, and they fire off the same button, and they can be fired as rapidly or as separately as you want. So you can fire them both as fast as you can fire the trigger, or you can fire just one and not worry about the other, and it's always going to have the next one reloaded for you. And it's just a simple rotating toggle system, which I should probably do a little video on separately for newer logic and weapon systems that I've been cooking up. But yeah, point is, that way it's not just a timer issue where one's on a delay or anything. If you don't want there to be a delay, the only delay is as fast as you can flick your fingers. But yeah, that's probably enough said about this plane. It doesn't especially look good or anything like that, but it functions well. It's got some decent fuselage armor, so along the back here where it's most often getting hit, it's got these little shield panels. And I should mention the reason why I'm using the 2x1s, even in a bigger area like this, is because all the shield panels had the same amount of health using smaller ones gives you more health per volume. So it takes 14 regular bullet hits, I believe, to break any of the shield pieces. If you used the bigger ones, then you'd be getting only a quarter of the health per volume as using the small ones. So that's just a little bit of trickery to get the most bang for your buck. And building techniques like that are also one of the reasons why this one got pushed up to almost 700 complexity. Is because there's a lot of little pieces in here for redundancy, so that things don't break off all in one go. But anyways, let's move on. In third place, we have the Kitten Jet Mark 15B, which this one is another VTOL. I'm not going to crack it open, but you can see the articulated thrusters in the back here, which are kind of one of the distinguishing features of my VTOLs. And this one also has the system with the rockets, where you can fire them as fast or as slow as you want, without any regard for timing them. But yeah, I already mentioned that, so we'll move on to the fact that this is probably the most powerful thrust-to-weight ratio of my VTOLs. And also, it's impeccably well balanced. I haven't touched the pitch controls at all, or the roll controls for that matter. And we're just going straight up, and we're only just now starting to tip backwards a little bit. So our front-to-back weight and thrust balance is very spot on for VTOL mode. In forward flight mode, less so. It wants to both nose up and nose down, just because it's not quite aerodynamically stable. But that's okay, it's acceptable. And it's a little bit faster and a little bit more agile than the previous VTOLs. So it's just all in all an improvement. And it still has the little funny features, I should call them. The non-combat features. And we've got the 6 smart cannons, the rockets, and yeah. At any point you can just toggle into VTOL mode, and it has the maneuvering capabilities to basically stop mid-air at full speed. And just overall very good VTOL plane. Let's come in here for one more landing before we move on. Doink. Coming in at second place, we have the Mark 14D2, which is an upgraded version of a slightly earlier plane, which had a lot of thrust vectoring. We have a third set of maneuvering thrusters piston glitched in, so it has a lot of oomph in its thrust vectoring. And one of the upgrades that it got much more recently is that low maneuvering mode to limit the angle of the servos to help control that. So I'll take off in high maneuvering mode and show you what I mean by having too much thrust vectoring. You would swear that there's gyros in there if I hadn't built it myself and know that there's not any in there. But when you click it into low maneuvering mode, it becomes a much more reasonable amount of movement that this plane can produce. Which also helps preserve your speed because you're not flopping around like a fish out of water, trying to control it. Which is one of the reasons why the original didn't make the list at all. It was always a pretty decent plane, but until I added the low speed or the low maneuverability mode, it didn't quite cut it. And this one's nicknamed the Black Cat because, well, it's black, and all my jets are called the kitten jets, so 1 + 1 = 2 there. It's got the same weapons kit. Doesn't have the fancy rocket thing, just has the one set of rockets. Flares, chaff, meow, all those things. And a terrible landing, but that's okay, because we're almost at the end of the video. And in first place, we had the Kitten Jet Mark 13M, and I couldn't decide between the 13M10 and the 13M12, because they're both really good in their own ways. But we'll start here with the Mark 13M10, which is probably the single most stable, well-rounded plane that I've made, pretty much ever. And in terms of fight winning, it's always done a good job too. It just doesn't really have anything special going on in the looks department. It's not even a fancy odd-width plane. It's got the standard 2-block wide cockpit there. But some of the noteworthy features we've got going on are a significant amount of armor laying underneath the main skin. So when the piston glitch comes down, those are hidden underneath of these blocks, but they still block both layers of engines because they're set slightly above it and the pistons come all the way down. Then we've got just simple thrust vectoring in the back. We've got logic support for it. And it doesn't have a high or low maneuvering setting because as is, it's just perfectly well-rounded. Not too much, not too little. And yeah, if I just make sure I don't hit this hill here, it pretty much doesn't nose up or down on its own at all. At full speed, it noses up maybe 1 degree every 5 to 10 seconds. It's extremely negligible. It basically flies straighter than an arrow, which is one of the reasons why I like it so much. It's perfect for formation flying, not just fighting, because it doesn't have any wobbles that you have to correct for. The only thing that you have to correct for in a formation flight is your position relative to the other person, which is the main thing you want to focus on. You don't have to worry about your own stability, which is often something I neglect in my planes. But yeah, other than that, it's kind of basic. It's, well, maybe not basic, but straightforward. So we'll hop over here to the 13M12, which is the zero-drag version of it. And it has all the bells and whistles. It has the high and low maneuvering mode, which is very important for the faster speed in this one. It has the extra armor plus some. I replaced some of the larger panels with the 2x1 trick for extra health per block space. And yeah, it easily goes supersonic. And in test zone corner to corner, I've gotten a max speed of about 1450, so almost Mach 2. But pretty much any plane can do that if it's zero dragged. It's just the same as stats. But once we kick it into low maneuvering mode, it's much easier to preserve that speed. Because just like with the regular version, it really, really likes to fly straight. Even going 1,300 miles an hour, well above its engineered speed, it's barely nosing up. So all in all, I would have to say this was one of my most successful planes, which makes sense because given that it's the Mark 13 M12, it's the 12th version of an already fairly good plane. Even the first version of it was pretty successful. And that'll wrap up my top fighter planes of 2025 list. I made a whole mess of them, and these are the best. If you want to support the channel, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.